Mexico's recent election wasn't just another headline. It was a revolution, not with guns and conflict, but with ballots and representation. We're about to dive into how a quiet, decades-long movement just completely redrew the map of political power. So, what does that even look like in the real world when a country actually achieves true gender parity in its government? It's not just some abstract idea, it's a number, a very specific and, frankly, a very powerful number. Get this, 50.5%. That is the share of seats women now hold in Mexico's lower house of Congress, the Chamber of Deputies. For the first time in the country's entire history, women aren't just at the table, they're actually the majority. But that number, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. The 2024 election wasn't just one single breakthrough. It was the final explosion after decades of work, and it has completely transformed Mexico's political landscape from the ground up. And in the Senate, Mexico's upper house, the balance is even more jaw-dropping. I mean, look at this. It's a perfect 50-50 split. Out of 128 seats, exactly 64 were won by women. That isn't just progress, it's literal perfect parity. And then there's the big one, the one that made headlines around the globe. For the very first time in its 200-year history as a republic, Mexico has a female president. Claudia Sheinbaum, who's a climate scientist and the former mayor of Mexico City, she didn't just win, she won in a landslide. This wasn't just a symbolic victory. It was a structural shift at every single level of power. Okay, so the big question is, how on earth did this happen? Because let me tell you, this was no accident. It wasn't some sudden cultural whim. It was the result of a deliberate, strategic, and often difficult fight that created a blueprint for equality. Yeah, you really have to zoom out to see the full picture. This was a marathon, not a sprint. Women got the right to vote way back in 1953, but the real game changer, the moment that lit the fuse, came with a specific law in 2014. And it still took another whole decade for that law's potential to become the reality we're seeing today. And this right here, this is the secret sauce, the parity in everything law. It wasn't a suggestion, it wasn't a guideline, it was a constitutional reform. It meant political parties were legally required to make sure half of their candidates were women. For everything, federal, local, you name it. This law basically flipped a switch on the entire system. And the results? I mean, just look at this contrast. It is absolutely staggering. Just 20 years ago, in 2004, women were less than 15% of lawmakers. Today, they're over 50%. That's not slow, gradual change. That is a complete political metamorphosis, all driven by that one key reform. But here's the thing. A law is just words on a page, right? What really made this work was the people. This wasn't just a top-down rule. It blossomed into a genuine social movement, powered by activists, voters, and a whole new generation that was demanding real change. And this quote from a newly elected mayor in Oaxaca, it just nails it. This movement became about so much more than just gender. It was about a deep hunger for better, more honest government. In a political system that's often been plagued by corruption, voters started seeing female candidates as a symbol of integrity, a totally new way of doing politics. And you absolutely cannot tell this story without talking about the youth factor. This was a movement that went viral. I mean, literally. Young voters took to social media with hashtags like #Mujeres en el Poder, Women in Power, exploding online. Platforms like TikTok and Twitter became these incredible tools for organizing and for shining a spotlight on female candidates. And this wasn't just about likes and shares. Nope, it turned into actual votes. The data is crystal clear on this. Exit polls showed that a whopping 60% of women under 30 specifically cast their ballot for candidates who are pro-gender equality. That's not just a trend, my friends. That is a powerful new voting bloc making its voice heard. All right, so let's zoom out again. What does this massive shift mean for Mexico on the world stage? Well, it's catapulted the country into a whole new league. But it also throws a harsh light on the very real challenges that don't just disappear when you win an election. I mean, check this out. To put it in perspective, Mexico is now ranked fourth in the entire world for women in parliament. That puts it ahead of just about every country in Europe, not to mention the US and Canada. It's a stunning leap that has made the whole world sit up and take notice. But as you can imagine, a change this big, this fast, It doesn't happen without a fight. The simple fact is, when you have more women in positions of power, they become more visible targets. And there's definitely a darker side to this story. 7 out of 10. Let that sink in for a second. That's how many female candidates in Mexico reported they faced some kind of political violence, whether it was intimidation, harassment, or worse. It's a really chilling reminder that getting elected is just one part of the battle. And yet, and this is what's so incredible, despite those very real risks, the world is looking at Mexico as a beacon. Organizations from the UN to the EU have been praising the country, calling it a global model for how you can actually design and build a more inclusive democracy. So, when you look at everything we've talked about, it's clear this isn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. It's really just the beginning. Getting a seat at the table is step one. Now comes the real test, governing well, and proving that this new face of power can truly deliver for everyone. So, Mexico has laid down the blueprint. They've shown the world that this kind of radical change is possible when you combine bold laws with a powerful social movement. And that leaves all of us with one big question to think about. Who's going to follow their lead? Which country will be next?